You know, it's not easy being a Muslim in America in this political and social climate. It's got to be even worse if people know you're a Muslim by the way that you're dressed. So today we talked to Zahra. And Zahra wears a hijab, and she walks around here in San Francisco wearing it and has some experiences that you will probably be surprised to hear about. So we'll find out what the world is like walking around in her shoes. Welcome, Zahra. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for being willing to open up. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's start with some of your background. Where were you born?
Los Angeles. I'm
Born
a
in
Southern
Los
California
Angeles.
native, yes.
A California native, your entire life.
Yes.
Okay, so for those who are not familiar, you know, they see the headscarf,
Yeah.
they don't really know what what the cultural significance of it is.
Sure.
Can you explain and educate some people?
Yeah, so I've been wearing my headscarf for over 20 years now, and you know, there were some years where I explained it as it protects me from men's gaze, and the other years I explained it as protects me from the sun. The way I explain it today is, as a Muslim woman, I believe that God commands me to cover my hair, my arms, my legs, and so it's an act of worship, pure and simple. I do it for God. I don't do it for any other reason. I do it by choice, and at the same time, it's a relationship I have. But I haven't left home without it in over 20 years, and so
Wow.
it is a part of me.
Now, you didn't wear it as a kid, I'm assuming.
Not as a young kid.
Not
I
as a young
started to
kid.
experiment with it between like 7 and 10, because that's when my mom started to, like, she was wearing it when I was 7 and 10. At that age, you still want to be like mom. The next 15 years, you want to have nothing to do with mom, but like at that age, you want to be like mom. So I did experiment with it as a kid. Yeah.
High school, college?
I wore it all through high school and college, law school, and ever since. So it's been a long time now.
Okay, well let's talk about how the culture has changed. I'm talking about the American culture and the
Yeah.
climate has changed. What was the reaction? You went to high school, I'm assuming, in Southern California?
Yes, public
In
school,
Los Angeles,
yeah.
public school.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was it like to walk around when you were in high school,
Right.
you know, 20 plus years ago?
Right.
And I probably shouldn't jump to any conclusions about your age.
No.
I
I
mean,
was in
last
middle
year,
school 20 plus years ago. for
Last
the
year when you
record.
were in high school, so what was it like to walk around? I mean, were you teased or were you hassled for it in school in Southern California?
So for a long time, I did this thing where I told people it was really easy to wear it, and I like it was something that I truly believed. But after having worked with kids who are being bullied now, I started to think about my own experience with it. And the reality is that when I was 10, which was a long time ago, I had it pulled off when I was in school. So this was like the first or second year that I was wearing it. I was sitting in class, and some kids behind me pulled it off. And you know what I always say in our bullying work today is kids shouldn't have to know what a hate crime is or have to explain their religion in that way to a principal to protect themselves. In high school, I think that the result of having been targeted for it in middle school was that in high school, I really embraced that I was the only one wearing it, and I used that as a pulpit, a pulpit or a platform, a podium, to talk about my politics, my religion, and I had the opportunity to come into teaching people who had never met a Muslim. But that was all pre 9/11. I was, you know, like I maybe fast forward to the day after 9/11, and I'm a freshman in college, and I remember being worried about going outside.
Really?
Thinking, is it bad that my scarf is colorful? My scarf is always colorful, but are people going to think that my headscarf is a celebration of the terrorist attacks? Which is not something I should have to worry about. Like,
So you were concerned then about the broad brush?
yeah, for sure. I mean, like my first memory of the day before is my dad calling our house and waking us up and saying, "Please don't leave home today," right? And then the next day when I had to leave home to go to class, it was like, am I safe? What kinds of safety precautions do I need to take? Do I wear the headscarf today, and what will people think when they see me?
Okay, I want to compare the before and the after. And again, I
Yeah.
met you for the first time 5
Sure.
minutes ago, so I don't know your whole story. So let's go back before 9/11. You're
Sure.
growing up, high school, wearing it. When you walked down the street, I mean, did you get looks? Did anyone harass you? Did cars drive by, yell things out? Or was it just, oh, okay?
I was fortunate to grow up in a really diverse neighborhood, but we were probably the only Muslim family that was visible. And so I did get looks. I'd get questions. I'd get people who were surprised that my mom spoke English when they'd see her with a headscarf. But I don't know that I ever worried about my safety, even after the bullying incident in school, the same way I have for the past 15 years.
These were just dumb kids in school. And kids are
Right.
cruel, and they'll pick on you for having red hair.
But it also just like, it wasn't even in my imagination that I could be physically attacked on the street for it. Whereas today, if I'm walking on the street at night, like I'm going to make sure that someone knows where I am, that I'm going to be in a well-lit area, and that I'm not walking alone for very long. And so, like it shifts just like the frame of possibility to think that there are women in this country today who are attacked in broad daylight at garages and on college campuses and grocery stores outside of their mosques and homes. Those weren't things that I think my family contemplated pre 9/11.
When was the first time that you really understood that it was a different world from the one you'd grown up in Southern California in your very diverse neighborhood? I mean, was there an incident or was there something that happened that made you think, wow, I'm not in Kansas anymore?
I would say it's two things. One is, that the frantic phone calls from my dad the day of saying, "Where's your mom? Like, please stay indoors today. We don't know what's going to happen," right? And in the weeks and months that followed, there was a small Arab grocery store down the street from our mosque that was attacked. And, to this day, like, I'm not sure that we know what it was. The mosque was fine, but that it was an Arab grocery store that was attacked in that era, like, sat with me, because that was, again, in our neighborhood in California. And so often, even then, in thinking about racism and bigotry, a lot of times, then and today, we think of it as it happens in the South, it happens in the East. It's not a California thing. And so it happens in California too.
Has there been a time when circumstances have ever really made you afraid? Is there a time has there been an incident that's happened to you where you really felt afraid?
A couple of weeks ago, I was in DC for the inauguration and the Women's March on Washington. And I realized that it was my first time seeing people wearing the Make America Great hats again, in person. Like, I'd seen it on television, but I hadn't actually seen it in person. And that was when I caught myself and I was like, Zahra, maybe you don't need to walk down this street, right? Like, go find some people that you're going to feel safe with. But I caught myself feeling unsafe. But don't stereotype all of the Trump supporters.
Right.
Don't profile them. And I remember, like, about an hour or so later, a drunk Trump supporter was walking down the street yelling, "He's our king, he's our king." And he circles back to a group of women that I'm standing with to yell at us in person. And that was a moment where I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, and he's bigger than me, and he's wearing this hat, which at the very least communicates that he was willing to overlook Donald Trump's racism and bigotry towards my community. And so get out of this situation really fast. It's a different time that we live in, right? Where people are okay with a Muslim ban, and they're okay with surveillance in our communities, and they're willing to talk about the need to target Muslims, and they're not shy about it the way they used to be. And I think that's the shift for me, is many racists, Islamophobes, and xenophobes have really felt emboldened in the past few months.
Okay, when you say that people are okay with that, do you believe that it's most people? Because the reaction both nationally and internationally has been to reject what was they call it a travel ban. It was a Muslim ban.
It was a Muslim ban.
But it was, people were appalled, and the majority of the country and the international community, as far as I understand it, rejected it. I mean, is that your feeling?
That's a great question, and thank you for pushing me to clarify, because I don't think that all of America is represented in the Make America Great Again hats, right? Like, as someone who was a lawyer present at San Francisco International to work with people who were stuck in secondary screening after the executive order was signed, the protests were so inspiring. And I remember at the Women's March, it was so inspiring. And then a week later to be at the protests and everything bigger than usual. People who never come out to protest came out to the Women's March, came out to the airport protests. And so I believe that my fellow Americans, the majority of them, are on the correct side of things, on the just side of these issues. I worry about a growing and vocal group, though, right? Recent studies have shown that hate groups have increased. We know that people who were maybe shy about their racism are feeling more emboldened because they have someone in office who validates them. There have been increased attacks on individuals and organizations, and so it's a tension that America is dealing with right now. But
let's dial it back from the statistics and from the broader picture, and let's narrow it down some. In terms of your own personal experience, I mean, have you been harassed on the street? Have people said things to you? Have these experiences that let me phrase it this way. A lot of the things I'm mentioning are things I read about and hear about, but there are those who will dismiss them as isolated incidents. Right. Are they isolated incidents, or have you had these things happen to you? And if so, tell us about them.
Sure. So probably the most traumatic incident in recent years was the mailing of fake anthrax to the local care office. We're a visible Muslim civil rights organization, and in the same month that presidential candidates were talking about a ban on Muslims in December of 2015, we opened the mail one day and out came a white powder. That put into motion a chain of events that included the evacuation of our offices, the hospitalization of our staff. It took about 24 hours for us to get back into operations and 36 hours for them to get clearance from the doctors. That someone would attack a Muslim civil rights organization in that way wasn't something that I had contemplated when I joined 7.5 years ago.
Right.
And to us, our only crime in their perspective would be that we are vocal about being Muslim and that we're advocating for civil rights for Muslims and for all Americans. That has shifted the way I think about civil rights work in this country. And it's not a new phenomenon, right? We know that for many generations, civil rights activists have been attacked. But it didn't hit close to home until it happened to me.
Okay, aside from the organization, because if someone's going to attack an organization, they are not looking at you personally. You are being attacked, but it's an abstract concept to them.
Fair enough.
So, I mean, have you personally? And what happens when you walk down the street wearing your hijab? I mean, do people treat you differently? Do they look at you in a funny way?
And I think that this is why I live in the Bay Area, right? Is that I really enjoy the safety and comfort of being in the Bay Area, where I'm more likely to get someone saying, I really like your headscarf, than take that thing off your head. And so and this is what I mean, that there's this tension, right? Where there's a lot of online hate, but in person it's great in the Bay Area. That's not to say that I don't hear from people who have those experiences, but I've been really fortunate.
You've been really fortunate in it.
At the same time, I take safety precautions, right? I look over my shoulder. I don't publish my address. There are a number of those types of things. And every day I'm getting emails from people who are like, well, what other safety precautions are you taking? What else can you do to protect yourself? Do you need security? And so that's even a conversation is a new reality. And so there's a part of me that's really grateful that I have not had the misfortune of experiencing something explicitly racist or something violent towards me individually. But I'm always hesitant about that answer, because I don't want to erase the fact that we hear from people daily in the Bay Area who say, I'm worried about sending my kids to school, or someone yelled at me while I was driving, right? That those things happen here also.
There are those who will read about stories about we've read all these stories about women who wear the headscarf, who are harassed, who have it torn off, who have people say and do vile things, and there are those who are well-meaning, who don't support that kind of behavior, who will say, well, then why don't you just not wear it and make yourself a target? How would you respond to those people who would tell you, maybe it would be easier for you if you didn't wear it?
Yeah. So there's a couple of answers that come to mind, right? The first is that as an American, I find that answer I find the idea of hiding my religious identity offensive. And I also recognize that my privilege is that I can hide my religious identity, but there are markers for different targeted groups that we can't hide, like my skin color, like my gender, right? And so as a civil rights attorney, even in my loyalty to the Constitution, it's to help my fellow Americans practice their religions and be diverse, free from any fear. The other thing that I worry about is that is traditional victim blaming, right? And we see it happening in different targeted groups, right? She wouldn't have been raped had she not been at the bar. He wouldn't have been shot had he not spoken to a police officer. And I worry that answer shifts responsibility in a way that doesn't work, because it really immunizes the oppressor in this circumstance. And so I'm going to continue to wear my headscarf, but I think that we need to shift it so that people of color, people of religious minorities, people of different sexual orientations don't feel unsafe on our streets.
As an African American, there are a lot of times when I will see something on the news or hear a news bulletin, robbery, or 4 people were shot, and what goes through my mind, and I have heard a lot of where I'm going with this. A lot of African Americans will go, "Oh, please don't let him be black. Oh, please don't let him be black." Do you deal with that being Muslim? If you hear there was a terrorist attack, or you hear,
Absolutely. I mean, the moment there is a terrorist attack or any violent attack, I think, unfortunately, it's a common sentiment against different minority groups. Please don't let it be one of mine, right? And that, I mean, that's horrendous, because what it does is it erases our ability to grieve with our fellow Americans, because we're so stressed out about suffering twice. We suffer as an American, and then we suffer as a Muslim American. So, and then there's this like really, unfortunate or awkward, like a relief also when it's someone else's problem.
Isn't that terrible?
It's like, oh my God, right?
Isn't that awful? You're absolutely right.
It's like
That's exactly it.
Yeah, I don't even have like words for it. It's not okay either way. And then there's this like analysis that comes later around, one, what was the role of law enforcement or agent provocateurs or informants in any potential terror plot? And then why is it that when it's not one of my people, we don't call it a terror plot? And so there's this like extended conversation, but I think it's layers of trauma, and just please don't let it be one of mine. Very, very unfortunately routine sentiment when things like this break the news.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to end this conversation, and part of me wants to say to you, continue to do things that keep you safe. Or I'm glad that nothing, personally really bad has happened to you. And I guess the best way to end is just to say keep doing what you're doing and keep the faith.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for talking with us.
Of course.
Yeah, we're
Awesome. Yeah.
that was
Very
great.
cool.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
doing
opening
that.
up.